Tipp FM's Tip Today.
With Slattery's Garage, Puck On. Over half a century driving the people of Tipperary and surrounding areas with quality, reliable and economical vehicles, new and used. Call the sales team today to discuss your next car or van on 067 24111.
You're very welcome back to Tip Today with me, Stephen Gleeson, here for Fran this morning. And I'm delighted to be joined here in studio right now by Thomas Conway. Good morning, Thomas.
Good morning, Stephen.
Thomas, a lot to discuss there and on the global scene. And I suppose we're going to start off with the Taiwan question at the moment. And the Trump was over in China, Trump's summit. Give us a brief history there of Taiwan and, you know, its relationship with the world and what's going on at the moment in that scenario.
Yeah, I suppose it was really interesting to watch it last week. Trump and Xi, the two most powerful people in the world, in Beijing, and you know, Trump was given the full tour. They rolled out a red carpet for him. They brought him to the Great Hall of the People, and they lavished him with praise. But it was the Taiwan question which I think dominated certainly the fallout from the summit. You know, there was a lot of speculation that it would be about trade. There was no trade deals really that emerged from it. But it really is Taiwan that is at the core, I think, of the US-China rivalry. A brief history of Taiwan. It used to be known as the island of Formosa. It was parts of it were a Dutch and Spanish colony in the 1600s. It was subsequently incorporated into China, but 1949, I think, was the watershed moment. That was the year in which Mao Zedong effectively ousted the Chinese rulers at the time. They fled to Taipei, the capital of which is now the capital of Taiwan, and established what they would see as an independent republic, but China doesn't, of course, recognise it. Now, very few countries do recognise it internationally, and there is kind of an informal relationship, and that informal relationship exists between the United States and Taiwan. For instance, the US provides Taiwan with military support, but it still stipulates that the capital of China is Beijing. So it takes a very ambiguous position, but the long and the short of it is Xi Jinping, the Chinese ruler, wants to take back Taiwan. That is one of his core motives in politics at the moment. It won't happen immediately. It won't happen, I think, in the near future, but long term, that is the aspiration from the Chinese perspective, from Beijing.
Thomas, you're here with Fran talking about global matters, you know, week in, week out. Trump is at the heart of it all, and, you know, he's just a finger in every pie, as they say here. And, you know, he was looking for someone to put pressure on Iran, perhaps. Would that be part of the reason for this?
Yeah, I think China is the country to do it. A significant amount of crude oil flows through the Strait of Hormuz from Iran to China. They are one of their main trading partners. Now, thus far, it has adopted kind of a position on the sidelines, on the margins. It is said essentially that, you know, the closure of the Strait of Hormuz and the war with Iran is not good for the world. But I think you're right. I think if there was a country that could exert pressure on both sides, it is China, because as we've noted with Fran previously, I mean, it's intertwined economically with the United States. It has that link to Iran as a trading partner. And nowadays, China is almost seen as a more reliable ally than the United States because of Trump's volatility in Washington, and because he's liable to do so much. Countries are increasingly looking to China and looking to increase their trade links with China. So it's a fascinating situation, but I think it's a very good point you make. I think China, if there is a country that can maybe broker a solution to this, China and Xi Jinping have the power.
It seems to be, in some respects, that the colonial powers, traditionally going back along, like Britain, America, like they're causing a lot of the problems in the world in a lot of people's eyes now, rather than what we perceived as, you know, the other side almost.
Yeah. And I think there's increasingly a realisation that middle powers, the likes of, I wouldn't call Ireland a middle power now, but Canada, France, the United Kingdom is now a middle power, are increasingly on the sidelines. And it's a world of big power actors, and the US and China are the main rivals. And that strategic relationship between the US and China, or that that relationship between the US and China, I think will come to define the 21st century. When the history of the next 100 years is written, I think America's priority is shifting slowly away from places like the Middle East and onto China. Now, it may not seem that way at the moment because Trump has invested himself in these conflicts, in this conflict with Iran, and of course the link with Israel and the United States is so strong. But long term, looking on a longer term horizon, they're the two main superpowers in the world at the moment, probably followed by Russia from a military perspective, but I think it is the US and China that will define the next 100 years, the next few decades even.
Yeah, absolutely. China just seems to be pushing on economically, militarily, in every respect, and they do seem balanced as well, which is something that we wouldn't have said traditionally here. Closer to home, I suppose, in the UK, Burnham's push is on to become the new PM.
Yeah, and finally, he has a route to doing so, and that is via the Makerfield by-election, which is scheduled to take place, or expected to take place, on June 18th. It's going to be very interesting. I think Starmer's time is effectively up now. You had a chain of events occur over the weekend. It emerged on Friday that Josh Simons, the Labour MP for Makerfield, was going to step aside so that Burnham could step in and contest that election. Wes Streeting, the health secretary, then effectively, or the former health secretary I should say, declared his hand over the weekend and made some kind of unusual comments about Britain rejoining the EU. Now, from an Irish perspective, I think a lot of people will be applauding that. But it'll be interesting to see how it sits with the British electorate. But certainly, I think Burnham is the man, and I will tell you why. There are three wings to the Labour Party in Britain. You have the centrists, the likes of Tony Blair, Keir Starmer. You have the hard left, on which Jeremy Corbyn would sit. And then in the middle of those, you have the soft left. And they would be the real working class roots of the Labour Party. Burnham represents the soft left. He is a kind of middle ground Labour voter who connects very well. He's been the Mayor of Manchester for the past couple of years, was an MP before that. But he understands, I think, the problems. Like, there is fierce inequality in Britain. Let's be honest. London is a hub and it's thriving and all that. But once you move up north, I'm a Newcastle United supporter in football, and I've been there a couple of times. And while it's a wonderful city, you can see the economic disparities. You can see the inequality that sits there.
The north is a different country, really. North. Liverpool, Manchester, Newcastle, all that area. There's a huge disconnect with London.
Yeah, and that is precisely it. And that's one of the reasons I think Andy Burnham might be one of the best candidates that Labour could choose when they have this leadership election. He has roots. Obviously, he's the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and that is a huge metropolitan area. He won a sweeping mandate there in the past two successive elections. He also has roots on Merseyside. He's apparently an Everton supporter. Seamus Coleman would be delighted to hear that. But he has roots both in Merseyside and in Manchester. So he knows that part of the country, and he knows the north well. And he's certainly going to push now. I think the time is now. He's 56. Streeting, on the other hand, is only 43 years of age. His time might come again. But Burnham has been around the block a while now. He's known as the King of the North. He's very, very well regarded up there. And I think he really will make this push. Some people are saying he could be Prime Minister by the end of the summer. So we'll see if that timeline plays out.
Will their global outlook change if he comes in, or do you just see nothing really changing, or what's your opinion?
Yeah, there was speculation for a while there that in a deal to become Prime Minister, Andy Burnham would actually make Keir Starmer the Foreign Secretary. So Keir Starmer would move to the side. So I wouldn't expect a huge shift. They will remain steadfast in their support of Ukraine, the UK, And the relationship with America, it'll be very, very interesting. The special relationship, as they call it. It'll be interesting to see what stance Burnham takes on that during the leadership contest. We kind of know what Streeting will bring. He is a centrist. He would be like Starmer in terms of foreign policy. But I don't detect a major shift. Relations with the EU, though, that is a core point. Britain is going to move closer to the EU. I can't see it rejoining the EU, like Streeting indicated, in the near future. I think that would take an awful lot. But they will certainly move and align closer.
I saw something online that said it'll probably take 30 years, 10 years for they realise they're wrong, and that's probably happened.
Yeah.
10 years to start talking about it and planning it, and 10 years to actually decide we're going back to the EU.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair timeline. I think it does. I mean, joining the EU in the first place is notoriously slow, and the process of rejoining would be slow as well. I mean, I think in this country, certainly, we were all sad to see Britain leave. It was a major economic blow that the country had to deal with. The European Union had to deal with it. And Britain is not only dealing with the economic fallout of it, but the political ramifications. But of course, the irony, as Fran pointed out last week, is that Mr. Brexit, Nigel Farage, is at the same time flying high in the polls with his Reform Party, having swept the local elections recently. So try and square that one. It's very hard to know. And I suppose you will have people on the ground in Britain who will justify Brexit. And they had to leave. It was a democratic vote, and although it was slim, the margin was something like 52-48. But certainly it inflicted a huge blow, I think, on the continent as a whole. And
Thomas, like the conflict that has probably dominated as well as the Middle Eastern one is the Russian-Ukrainian war. And when you're looking at that, a name that we have almost forgotten that's been mentioned a lot recently is Angela Merkel.
Yeah, and wouldn't that be very, very interesting? Because I think there's a lot of negative sentiment towards Angela Merkel because of how closely she positioned both Germany and the EU with Russia, in terms of reliance on gas pipelines and economic relations and that. Now, I don't think Vladimir Putin feared her, but she had a relationship with Vladimir Putin, and she shifted the EU closer to Russia and failed to foresee the threat that it posed. So the fact that she would be brought back into the arena to deal with Russia is a very interesting proposal. There have been no formal, there's no formal declarations around this. It's only mooted. Der Spiegel, the German newspaper, reported it over the weekend. There's also reports that another former German Chancellor, Gerhard Schröder, that would be Putin's favourite candidate to broker some sort of deal between the two. Now, he's very much pro-Russia. He's almost a lobbyist for Russia. So I think he would be out of the question as far as Ukraine is concerned. But yeah, Merkel, I mean, she's out of office, a couple of years now. Widely regarded in Germany, a popular chancellor. But, it's only in the subsequent years, since Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that I think the mood has kind of soured on her a little bit. But there is no doubt she is very, very capable, and she would be able to talk to Vladimir Putin. She has a relationship with him. And I suppose a relationship with Donald Trump as well.
It'll be interesting to see where that goes. And government collapse in Latvia as well, with the Latvian PM resigning.
Yeah, that was a very, it arose because of a drone incursion. Apparently Ukrainian drones flew into Latvian airspace. They were probably hacked by the Russians. There was kind of a controversy in Latvian politics, and it ultimately brought down the government. So I think the reason I added it in to today, and I wanted to mention it, is it is demonstrative of the effects that this Russia-Ukraine war is having on the entire continent, particularly on that Eastern European front. Countries like Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova are really feeling the effects, and that was illustrated by what's happening there.
Another war, Israel and Lebanon, and they've agreed a ceasefire extension. How realistic is it?
Yeah, it's not realistic, is it? When you consider that there were attacks over the course of the weekend, and there was also a phone call between Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump. And Israel is on the cusp of an election. They expect an election campaign to start within the coming weeks. But I mean, there was a 45-day ceasefire declared last week, and there were attacks over the weekend, so it's very hard to know what is happening there.
Do you think that election will take place?
Yeah, I think it will take place. I mean, it has to take place by October. It had been deferred because of obviously what happened in Gaza and the conflict in the region. Do I think Benjamin Netanyahu will win it? I wouldn't be entirely sure. Two opposition politicians have teamed up to form a new political party. They will pose a threat to him, and they would be seen as more moderate than Netanyahu. May invoke a slight shift in policy, but nothing dramatic. So it will be very interesting to see.
The other side of the world, over in the Caribbean, America, the US again, of course, are planning to indict Raul Castro, and Cuba is under siege at the moment.
Yeah, Raul Castro, the brother of Fidel Castro, he ruled the country. This is over the downing of two planes 3 decades ago, and I think it would further strain the relationship between the country, which is already at a low point. Obviously, the Trump administration has imposed that oil blockade, amongst other measures, on the regime in Cuba, but there seems to be a humanitarian crisis there. I mean, many people, including Cuban exiles, will not be a fan of the political system in place in Cuba, but I think that is no excuse when you see humanitarian suffering on the ground. I think most people would agree that, when you have that kind of suffering, I mean, there was a change, there was kind of a softening from the US a couple of weeks ago. It seems to have gone out of the news again now.
And what are they doing? What are the US doing? They're trying to take over a lot of parts of South America, Central America.
The plan is to dominate the Western Hemisphere, i.e. Latin America, Central America, North America. And that is the Trump, he calls it the Dunroe Doctrine, after the Monroe Doctrine. That is the stated plan. And you see what happened in Venezuela. That went so well for Trump that I think it emboldened him. And of course, at the heart of the movement over Cuba is Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, whose parents were Cuban immigrants. Part of his raison d'etre, his reason to be as a politician, is to, I suppose, restore democracy in Cuba. But certainly what's happening at the moment doesn't look like a restoration of democracy. It looks quite different.
And around the world, there's a lot of misery in different parts. An Ebola outbreak in the Congo is another thing that is very concerning.
Yeah, this is headlining the news, and it is very concerning. I have 65 people killed here. It's up to 80 as of this morning. More than 250 cases recorded. Now, I was listening on the airwaves this morning. It's not expected to be a global threat, as in it will not precipitate a global pandemic, thankfully, but it is quite an infectious and quite an aggressive form of Ebola that's circulating in the Congo now and South Sudan. And the Congo is a nation roiled by political instability anyway, so it is certainly a cause for concern. I don't think they know how to properly treat it, but certainly with the post-traumatic stress of COVID, and then we had that hantavirus outbreak over the past few weeks. It doesn't do people's psychology any good. It's quite frightening, all right.
Yeah, stuff all around the place. Well, look, I'd love to have more time to chat with you this morning, Thomas. It's fascinating as always. Our global news correspondent and journalist with the Nina Guardian. Thomas, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks, Stephen.
So that was Thomas Conway there. We're going to take a very quick break. Back with more after this.
Tipp FM's Tipp Today.
With Slattery's Garage Puckon. Now is the time to pick up your next van. From the award-winning Peugeot Partner van to the Expert and the load-lugging Boxer van. We have big vans, high-roof vans, long wheelbase vans. You'll find them all at Slattery's Garage Puckon. See slatterysgarage.ie.